What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, what is going on, everybody? Hopefully everyone is having a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday. Here's the game plan. My guy Jackson, formerly known as Intern Jackson, I think he's just making his way to just co-host on Kauff on Campus. Jackson will chime in from Old Town Scottsdale, where he just moved a couple weeks ago. And he sent me a list of different topics and things he wanted to talk about. So I said, let's fire it up, because this week, and the plan will be, we do reaction videos / podcasts to all the games, usually Thursday night football, Sunday night football, Sunday football with Coward, Monday night football. I think we're going to do the same this weekend. So I will have an audio podcast only with the mailbag on Saturday, but I also will have a video and open up that podcast with a reaction to the Notre Dame game on Friday night. And then Saturday is a massive football day. We have 3 college football playoff games. We have 2 NFL-style playoff games, given it's Ravens-Steelers and Texans-Chiefs. I just saw before I recorded this that Mahomes practiced today, so who knows? Maybe he's able to go. And as Coach Reed said, if he's ready, he'll go. This ain't the NBA. We ain't load management. We're trying to win. We're trying to win ball games. So we got 5 sweet games on the docket for Saturday. We'll probably do a couple separate videos on the NFL games, on the college games, and I'll put it into one podcast for Sunday. So we got a lot going on. Buckle up. If you're not ready to work come December, football season hitting the home stretch, you shouldn't be in this chair. And luckily for you, I'm here for you. So get ready to consume. We got a lot going on, but today will be college football only, from the transfer portal to the games to just everything that's going on right now in the world of collegiate football. Very, very exciting. But before we dive into Jackson, Christmas, Hanukkah right around the corner. If you want to get a gift for somebody, go get them a pair of tickets to a football game, to a basketball game, to a hockey game, to a concert. Make their day under the tree. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem the code JOHN. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, it's a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. I just almost sliced off my finger at the gym out of the sauna, shaving my head. And I'm fired up to talk some college football after we watched the worst 2 Monday night games I think you'll ever see. Jackson went to a game that easily could have been on Monday Night Football this weekend, the Patriots and the Arizona Cardinals, which would have fit right in with that crew last night. In fairness, Minnesota Vikings doesn't belong with the other 3 teams, but they were lumped in. But luckily, we got a lot going on. We got a Friday night Notre Dame game. We got college football, which kind of sucks that, and I get it, the NFL doesn't have a choice because they're playing the Wednesday game, so they got to play these guys on Saturday. I do think they might have tipped their hat if Christmas had been on like a Friday or Saturday and given them the Saturday, but they had to play the games. Pisses me off a little bit, but I get it, Jackson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I was more, you kind of just went past you slicing your finger. You said shaving your head. Like, how does that happen? We're not going to talk about it.
No, I mean, sometimes I usually, I try to get, the Rogan and all the health nuts talk about the sauna being really good for you. So I try to get 2 or 3 times a week. And if it's in my head shaving cycle, I will take my razor and my backpack and, get my shave on there. So I shave my head. I'm coming out. We got like 45 minutes till we got to do this. And I put my shit away in the backpack, but then I needed my lotion, because you gotta lotion moisturize the head. And as I reached in, I think I usually use the Mach 5. If anyone wants to sponsor, I love that Gillette razor. But I have I ordered it on Amazon. It's like the 3, but it's not as protected. And I sliced the top of my finger off. So I'm butt naked. I don't have any lotion on. I got a guy sitting right next to me. I got blood everywhere. I'm wrapping it with a little hand towel, but it's not really working. I also cut the back of my head shaving, so I'm bleeding down. I'm just like,
Oh my
fucking
gosh.
help me.
How long have you been bald? If you don't mind me asking, like, do you miss having hair, or do you like just waking up, not having to do your hair, but you do have to go through lotioning and shaving your head every once in a while?
What's funny is I thought about that the other day because this it's all the rage going to Turkey. A lot of guys go to Turkey. They have a procedure there that I've heard is actually pretty cheap. It's like under $5,000. Now the trip there, depending on where you live in America, is not cheap, but the actual procedure, it's like, would I come back? But I went bald when I worked for the Eagles. Uh, in football in the NFL, you get it. They send a haircutter during the season to the facility because I mean, coaches don't have time. If someone's like Sean McVay gets his haircut twice a week, it's like, well, yeah, they bring the person to him in his office so he can like watch film. But I remember getting my haircut and looking in the mirror and thinking, this is so dumb. And I had been on Rogaine and Propecia, and Propecia is one of those drugs that's not covered by insurance. So at the time, this is like 2009 and 10. It was like I didn't have any money. It was $100 a month. I started doing the math the rest of my life. I'm like, it's not even working. So it's well over a decade. I noticed it at Fresno State when I was a GA. We were at the bowl game, and they take a bunch of pictures during bowl week. And there was like a picture coming in. We were like practicing in New Mexico's dome, and it was like a drone angle. And the other coaches were like, Middlekauff, we can see your scalp. It's like, oh my God, I'm done.
So just bad hair early on. You just said, you know what? I'm just gonna go
I never
bald.
had great hair. Like you got, it looks like you got pretty good flow. I just, my hair
Good
was
genes.
average. My hair was very average. So part of coming back is you just get to replace what you already had. It's not like they just give you like, who do you want? Do you want Stamos, Pitt, or Brady? Brady's a good example, right? He clearly got hair plugs, but he had good hair. Like Peyton Manning, right? Peyton's hair holding on for it's not great, right? But that's what I would be. It's like, do I come back just for average hair? Just let it
That's
go.
like the Celtics player Derek White. He's got one of the worst hairlines in the NBA, and I think Charles Barkley, Shaq were making fun of him on Inside the NBA. That next year he just went bald. He's like, you know what? I'm not going to deal with the bad hairline. I'm just going to go bald. Like, it's just funny.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain. I mean, I guess you guys how often you get a haircut? Every month?
Every 2 months, yeah, grows
So
pretty
you
quick.
don't really have to worry about it that often. You can't. I can't let my hair go for more than like 4 days because you get the cul-de-sac. You look
Yeah,
like shit. So you gotta shave your head. Anything formal, you gotta shave your head. But
if
it encompasses one. You shave your face, your head all in the shower. So you just kind of go like this. But every once in a while you make a mistake, all of a sudden you chop your ear off.
yeah, if Notre Dame wins the Natty, I'll shave my head with you.
I was
I'll go
actually looking at
bald.
James. I was looking at James Franklin today. I'm like, he's a good looking bald guy. He's got a very pulls it off well. Very slick dome.
He does. Yeah. Speaking of James Franklin, let's get right into it. He had a press conference the other day, and you sent it to me too, talking about the whole thing going on right now with his backup quarterback, Bo Prabula. He was kind of forced to enter the transfer portal because due to the transfer portal windows and how good their team is, it's like December 9th to December 28th. And where Penn State's road to the Natty is, they most likely will play until January. So he was forced to hit the portal, and he was talking about how this is an issue having free agency right before the playoffs. What was your reaction to what he said, and what do you think is the solution of this? Because although he says, yes, we need a college football commissioner, it's more the academic calendar that kind of, is a factor for the portal being at this time.
I would say that a lot of these guys that come across my timeline that quote unquote enter the transfer portal, they don't mean that much to me, even if they're coming from a Georgia, not Georgia, but like a non-playoff team. It's like whatever, it happens. Like Alabama has a bunch of guys. Like, who knows? Maybe DeBoer wants them out. I would say this is the most polarizing one because it was a guy who has played this season for a team that I was kind of looking at their map. I'm like, I think they could easily be in the Final Four and then have some good momentum. It's like the NFL playoffs, right? You win a couple games. We can talk shit about them all we want, but if they win 2 games, they'd have a lot of momentum going in the Final Four to play Georgia. When that story broke, I think, college football people freaked. Like, this is insane. And then he put out a statement, and the first two things he said were, I talked to my parents and my coaches. I'm a PA guy. I was like, I don't think he's mad at Penn State because I think that's what everyone's first reaction was like. He's saying, "Screw you, I'm out." Clearly, that's not the case. And then what story happened within the last 24 hours? Aller's coming back to school, so it actually makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
I actually don't think it's that weird at all. And as James Franklin just said, he doesn't want to do this. He just is forced to do it because of the timeline. But the problem is, how do you move the timeline right to like after the Natty? Well, school's all starting. So we already touched on transcripts clearly don't matter. You can transfer wherever you want. But you can't just show up like 3 weeks into class, probably, right? You have to start at the beginning of the semester. They have to get you a schedule. So I listen, I thought a lot about this. I'm sure what the hell's the solution? But this is not. He's simply leaving because I mean, where do you think? Do you think he gets a Big Ten starting job? Is he that good?
I feel like he could go to a West Virginia, or he could go to like a Syracuse, maybe a lower level, like an Iowa or something like
Maryland.
that. Maryland, yeah, it's tough because he's a guy that hasn't really thrown the ball as much. I mean, he stepped in when Aller got hurt against Minnesota, which was a game that they almost lost, or the one they had against Wisconsin too. But it's funny, I texted you this last night too, and for Penn State, it's kind of a big disadvantage for them because that's their backup quarterback. Besides Prbula, the only other player on the roster that's thrown a pass is Tyler Warren, their tight end. So if Aller were to get hurt, like you almost would go towards to Tyler Warren versus a true freshman that hasn't even seen a down. So that's one of those things too, where last year Malik Murphy for Texas had to do the same thing, but it being a 14 playoff and them having Arch Manning, it wasn't that big of a deal. But for James Franklin, they use Prbula a ton in the running game, which is kind of a disadvantage for them. But he's forced. Like I don't blame the guy for having to go and get an opportunity because if he waited till January, what options was he going to have at the quarterback position?
My question is, does he already know where he's going? Because if he doesn't, then I think he could easily continue to just be on Penn State while his agents kind of work the phone.
Mm.
If he went blind, which it doesn't feel like he did, right? I saw something on social media that Jackson Arnold, who I would say is one of the bigger disappointments this year, got well over $2 million to go to Auburn. So the money getting floated around for these quarterbacks, like I obviously in football, you watched last night, Kirk Cousins making way more than every player on their team. He's not even a top 15 player on the Atlanta Falcons. But guys understand it. I do think when you're a little younger, I mean, I'm sure there are some guys on Auburn. It's like, I'm making $400,000. This guy sucks. It could get weird fast. Like, where's the dude, like the guy you mentioned from Texas? Where did he
Malik
end up
Murphy.
transferring last year?
Yeah, so he went to Duke, and then now he's in the portal again. He's most likely probably going to go to Kentucky, or an Ole Miss is looking at him too. But
Was he
yeah,
good at Duke?
yeah, he was good. I mean, they're 9-3, a really quiet 9-3 team. So he definitely improved, and that was kind of his first year where he played the entire season, and then he leaves, and then Duke actually upgrades and gets Tulane's quarterback. So a bunch of movement in the portal in terms of the quarterbacks.
I do think beside like the Caleb Downs, like the no-brainer guy from a top 10 program that's a NFL guy, the transfer portal is essentially just quarterbacks, right? It's getting the sweet backup at a playoff team. It's getting the Duke kid. It's getting the Toledo kid or Tulane kid, or it's getting last year Cam Ward from Washington State, and then it's a coin flip because no one knew if everyone knew Scadaboo was going to be this good, he'd be at USC, not Arizona State. So there's a lot of randomness into it. That's why I wonder, like Belichick right now, where do they even start? I don't even know, and I know these teams have personnel departments, but like, how many kids? Isn't it like 2,000 kids in the transfer portal? And I would
Yeah.
imagine half of them, their agent is literally more. Most of them, if you're a Division I transfer portal guy, your agent or your representation is calling every single coach. It's like, fuck, I don't have time.
Yeah, and last year too, when you talk about Cam Ward, the thing with Miami was they got lucky because they just stayed around and waited for Cam Ward because he was deciding back and forth. Do I go to the draft? Do I stay at Wazoo? And I don't think he committed to Miami until like late December or early January. So Florida State wanted him really bad, where they're like, well, we're not going to wait around and hope that we get Cam Ward. And that's what led him to DJU. So to your point about Bo Prbula, it's like, does he stay around and a school tampers him? Which I was shocked too. Like, if you're a guy on a CFP team like him, you would think that some tampering, under closed doors is going on where you could be like, hey, like, West Virginia, I'm going to go to your school, but let me stay with my team throughout the playoff, and I'll be there after when I hit the portal whenever we lose.
Yeah, I mean, that's That feels fair. I think it's hard. What if he went into the game and got hurt? Like, would it's almost like I'm going to sign this dude in free agency and his team, it's different, right? But all of a sudden he shatters his leg in the second round of the playoffs, like his contract. It is kind of risky. I think a lot of times it's like, what the fuck's going on? This is so like Miller Moss. It's like, bro, you just got benched on a 6-6 team. I did think like his response once Allard comes back and James Franklin, everyone kind of feels bad about this, but it's like he has no choice. And to me, once Allard's coming back, my question is this: if Allard had declared for the draft, which if I'm Drew Aller and I see Jackson Arnold's getting $2.5 million, my physical skills, listen, we can nitpick him all we want, and he was up and down this year. But he makes enough plays where you go, I could see a lot of coaches falling in love with this guy, and all of a sudden it's like, Drew Aller is the 7th pick of the draft. What did Penn State have to pay to retain his services? Because that's the other thing. It's not like, well, there's 7 quarterbacks in this draft. It's kind of wide open. Shador is the only guy. And honestly, Aller standing next to Shador. He's bigger, stronger, bigger arm. And it's not like Shador's Dion as an athlete. Aller's not a bad athlete. I mean, who's to say that like Drew? We've seen way crazier. Trey Lance, Carson Wentz, these guys go really high. Like you telling me Drew Aller with his skills at Penn State couldn't be a top 5 pick? No fucking way. We watch it every year. I'm not saying it's right, but especially what if he rattles off a couple playoff victories? So, I mean, do they just give him $5 million? Because like $1 million ain't retaining the services. Not if he has a chance to be a top 10 pick. Maybe he's thinking I could be a lock. We have another good year of him, the number 1 pick. Still kind of risky though.
I like him coming back though. I mean, with Andy Kolenicki as the OC,
but do you agree he'd be a lock 1st round pick right now? Probably.
Agreed. Yeah, because you got Shador, Cam, and then it's like insert third quarterback that would be a late guy or maybe first, second, or like early second round. But that leads me like my second one. It's like because heading into the season, it was Carson Beck, it was Jalen Milroe, it was Quinn Ewers. Now you kind of sit back. It's like those 3 quarterbacks with Drew Aller returning. It's like, do they return too? But it's like Alabama's like, do they move on from Milroe?
Yes.
Does Georgia move on from Carson Beck or do they keep him? And then the Quinn Ewers thing's really interesting because his draft stock's been low and people have been kind of linking him to North Carolina a little bit. Or I think Michigan State was rumored to be offering Quinn Ewers $4 million if he were to leave Texas, because I'm pretty sure Arch Manning's going to be the guy. They're tired of Ewers. But what do you make of those 3? Because they're in a situation where Beck's hurt right now. Milroe's got a bowl game, and then Ewers got a lot to prove with these CFP games to try to maybe improve his stock.
Well, to me, this is starting to enter like the Purdy conversation. Like, I like Purdy as my starting quarterback, but once we start talking business, we have to do an extension. The number matters. So, like, giving him $80 million guaranteed, hell yeah, want him as my starting quarterback. Giving him $200 million guarantee, we got a problem. I have no problem giving Quinn Ewers $500,000 to come compete. Giving him $4 million if I'm Michigan State, that is insanity. I mean, that is crazy. I cannot see Bill Belichick paying him. How can you give these guys this money? Quinn Ewers should stay in college if he's got $3-4 million on the table. Every human being with a pulse should tell him, do not go to the pros if Michigan State is giving you $4 million. But like, yeah, some of these guys, what's crazy is like, it's a little like the stock market. It feels like why do I have to pay so much for Quinn Ewers? Sometimes like a couple years ago, you get Bo Nix transferring. I know he ends up at Oregon, but he did not feel like a person everyone was banging down the doors for. Same thing with Penix. So it's like, are we sure that you have to go for this quote unquote brand name? I'd be very careful with that. I really would. And especially paying that type of money. Because if I'm a player on Michigan State, if he comes and he's the next, All-American, okay. But if he's just what we've seen, I'd be fucking pissed off. Like, wait, I've been in the program for 3 years. I'm like a guy that's going to be, let's say, a mid-round pick. I'm a good guy. I'm a team captain. And we pay this guy $4 million, and then all of a sudden we're getting that. I think you got to be very careful. That's, to me, a Belichick skill that I think he's going to try to balance pretty well at that. And I wonder why it's like you watch some of these college games, like, yeah, what the hell happened to them? Which we've always seen weird college losses. It happens more now. And I wonder if guys just like, I barely even know this guy. He makes a bunch of money. I'm not playing that hard for him.
Yeah, it's an interesting realm. I was going to ask you about this later, but since we're talking about transfer quarterbacks, if you were a head coach at Kauff's program, what type of stuff are you looking for in a transfer quarterback to be an immediate starter? Because let's face it, I know Bill Belichick, you mentioned him, he signed that 4-star quarterback, but there's no way that he starts a true freshman week one, right? He's going to go out and try to get a transfer. So if you were a head coach, what type of things are you looking for to get a transfer quarterback to be an immediate starter for your program?
Well, I talked to some people in college football and some of my scouting buddies, and they said the hard part, quarterback character matters, right? So, like, obviously, you have to have a skill set to even be talked about, but like your wiring, your drive, like all that stuff. I mean, just look at the crop of guys that just got drafted. Seems like they were all super high character guys, in this last class. How do you, in a couple weeks, figure out their background? Think about when you scout a college player, you spend honestly sometimes when they're a hype guy, they're underclassmen when they're not even draft eligible, and then either their junior or senior year, you spend all year long digging up on the guy. All of a sudden, I just get 7 names thrown at me. It's like, okay, well, I can call coaches, but how can I really know? Like, there's a lot of information flying around. Maybe they want to retain the guy. I would be very uncomfortable in that environment with the quarterback. Other positions, it kind of is what it is. But even that, like when you high school recruit a guy, you typically, I would say, at minimum, like 6 months would be a short period of time. A lot of time, it's well over a year. Meeting them in spring recruiting as a junior or sophomore if you're a bigger program, knowing him, knowing his family, bringing them to campus, going to their house, getting a feel for their brothers and sisters and like where they live and their high school coach. So maybe part of that is if you high school recruited the guy, you would know him. And I think Belichick talked about that. I saw with McAfee that some guys that North Carolina was interested out of high school, they ended up going to Clemson or Miami or Bama or LSU, and now they're transferring. Our program, people within the program know the kid well. It's easier to do that. UCLA, when Chip was there, benefited from that a lot. A lot of LA kids would leave to go Michigan, you name it. Charbonnet, I think, is a Michigan guy. And then all of a sudden, we would have wanted you out of high school, but you spurned us for the bigger program. Now you're coming back and we know you. So that's, I think, where coaches get very comfortable. I would have a hard time if I don't know you. It's like, why are you transferring? And you're also asking for $2 million. I think it's tough, man. I do, like, I'm not trying to, like, the media is always like, no sympathy. College coaches always bounced around. It's like, well, yeah, and we understand that. But it's also like we all want to root for the health of the sport, and it feels a little out of whack. I don't have the solution though. I mean, it's because you couldn't do the transfer portal. The easiest thing would just be after spring ball, right? So for summer school, for fall, but like that's a huge disadvantage for guys that know they're not going to play anymore. So spring ball for them at their program. Like if I'm at Penn State and James Franklin goes, you're not going to start here next year. Right? Wouldn't you say that and slash money is a big reason most guys transfer? They're not going to play where they can get more money. A lot of times it's tied together. Well, I go, why, if we just X'd out the winter transfer portal and made it in the spring, that the winter I would be stuck at my program just practicing for a team that I'm not going to play on. So it doesn't make much sense, but clearly, and right now is really the only time because it's kind of winter break and you got to let them transfer so they can enroll into school where it doesn't even feel like they're going.
James Franklin also talked about a commissioner needing to be placed in college football. Do you think that would help anything, or do you know anyone, or maybe it's a group of coaches and bodies, or I guess athletic directors, former athletic directors that would fit the position, or do you kind of are against a commissioner? Because it seems like we always have all these issues and stuff, but we're leaning on the NCAA to make, I guess solutions out of it, but they're not really doing anything to make changes.
Yeah, to me, the only way a commissioner would make sense if they break away. And so if the college football playoff, whatever group of 40 teams is their own entity, like I'm still the Ole Miss or Alabama football program, but I don't answer to the athletic department / NCAA. We're like our own business. Maybe we do a revenue sharing with the school where they get 20% of our revenue. We give the kids, another 30%, and the other goes into the business. but you can't really have a commissioner with the NCAA. It doesn't make sense. They have to go on their own, like the NFL. It's their own kind of entity. So until that happens, I do feel like one day that's going to happen, but it does feel like we're a little far away from that. Like, are we a 16 team? Like the NCAA has nothing to do with the playoffs. Think about that. Nothing to do with it. Where in college basketball, the NCAA tournament is theirs. Like they signed the deal. So the two revenue generating sports, which the majority of the revenue comes from football, I would say the NCAA has little to nothing to do with any of it. So like because forever it was like when I was at Fresno State, there was a minimum. I don't know if this still exists, but for a long period of time, forever, it was like the minimum requirement of SAT score meets GPA. It was like a sliding scale. Does that even exist anymore? Like, do you even need any requirements, most schools? Because transfer portal, it was also the same thing. You had to hit a bunch of requirements to transfer into like shitty schools like Fresno State, San Diego State, let alone like try to transfer to Texas. Clearly none of that matters anymore. So why do I need some fucking overeducated loser that couldn't tell me the difference between a touchdown and a first down that like when I'm allowed to recruit? Like the NCAA is dead. It's just when does it become official? And then who would these coaches? Because part of Roger Goodell, he butts heads with coaches. You know, part of the commissioner, it's like working on behalf more of the teams, the owners, and the business, not necessarily what the coaches want. It's a tough job. It's not like because one coach would have an opinion, the other coach would want something different. It would not be an easy gig.
For 128 schools too, like that's so many teams.
Yeah, to me, it wouldn't be that unless they all went independent. But like, is Montana or San Diego State going independent? Do they have enough? Does it make sense to do that? And then what happens to those schools? It's fun. It's never been. I'm excited for this weekend, but you could also argue it's never been more up in the air. Like the health, like how is this going to play out? I can see a lot of scenarios where it could get something weird could happen. I mean, there's a lot of money coming in, but there's also a lot of hands in the cookie jar now. And I think a lot of players are in a weird way. Some of them are making money, but like what percentage of them are actually making money? It feels like a smaller percentage. Like social media makes it seem like it all. No chance. Like are all the offensive linemen at all these Division I schools making any money? But you can't function. You can't run a team without them. So it's like the guard, center, and guard are just cool with their shitty quarterback making $2 million where they make $75K and get like 20% off their Ford F-150 while he's driving a Ferrari. You know, that's what we talked about that with Riola. It's like you got multiple 3-year starters, on a program. And then you got this hotshot kid halfway through the season. You're like, is this guy even any good? You can't bench him because you're paying him. Before, that's one thing with college football. It wasn't the NFL. Like, you would go to your backup, right? You wouldn't hesitate. It's like, whatever. Go to another guy. Now it's like, well, we just got to ride it out with Riola, which they're not wrong because they've invested so much. But what does the team think?
Yeah, the team dynamics with NIL and stuff definitely is.
Look at Caleb. I would say Caleb's the first true NIL superstar. He feels a little bit on an island right now on his team. Feels weird when you watch the body language of the squad. It's just something's. I don't blame him. I mean, he was on an island in college, lived in that penthouse suite in fucking LA, probably drove a Bentley, getting millions of dollars.
Yeah, they should invest in more money in their defense for sure. USC, but
yeah, it's the most wonderful time of year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving. And we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. When you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Yeah, we got 4 big games this weekend. I cannot believe. Felt like last Saturday, we were missing something. But let's start with 10 Indiana at 7 Notre Dame. Probably to be the coldest one of the weekend. Indiana State Championship. What sticks out to you when you look at this matchup between the Hoosiers and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish Friday night?
I feel like you guys blow them out
I feel like too.
in Notre Dame fashion, like 30-10 and just kind of overwhelm them. I I would be very surprised if this is a game. I mean, you guys kind of that NIU's, I don't know, is that one of the worst losses in the history of the program?
Yeah, that's it's a tough one to swallow. You can't really.
They weren't even good this year, were they?
No, they finished like 5th or 7th in the MAC. Yeah, they were ranked at one point and they lost to Buffalo. But no, I feel like Notre Dame's got a lot of momentum in this game, especially with Marcus Freeman, that long-term contract. I sent it to you, 6 years throughout 2030. So to be able to have him firm for the next 6 years plus is big time. But I just feel, to your point, this offensive line, I think, is just going to push and bully that Indiana front seven. And they're just going to be able to run the football down their throat. But Indiana, according to statistics, they're the number one rushing defense in the country. But we saw Ohio State being able to run the football on them during that game when those two played.
Well, to me, it was like the Jimmies and the Joes in that game. It felt like, yeah, you guys do have some James Madison guys playing key roles. And they hadn't looked like that against most of their other opponents. Like they looked way faster. Their defense was elite. You would watch them against teams like Nebraska or Washington and be like, how are they way faster than these teams? And then that Ohio State game, I was tempted to bet them against Ohio State. And that first drive, remember that drive? I was like, damn, Indiana, Ohio State's in some trouble. And then I was like, oh, actually, not really. I think it's going to look a lot like Ohio State. And it'll be, we don't get that many college football games in the weather like we do in the NFL. That could neutralize some of the scoring. Like if this was a 70-degree day, are you guys way more likely to win by 20? Is it like a 10-7 game at half and then you guys pull away? Are we talking snow and stuff? Like what weather did you say?
I think it's 30% snow. So I hope it snows because that would be phenomenal at night at South Bend. You wonder how Curtis Rourke can do in the snow because they do like to throw the football, but it feels like all these games outside of Texas, if it's going to be below 20 degrees or 20 degrees lower, it feels like it's going to be the running game. That's the deciding factor in most of these games.
It hasn't been their big thing, like just back shoulder fades,
Yeah.
outside one-on-one back shoulder fades.
They did that against Ohio State, and I think Ohio State had like 4 PI calls on them, so they could do that against Notre Dame because they're two cornerbacks. They allowed like 340 yards against USC. They're prone to get some PIs on them too, but I think that front seven, which Howard Cross is coming back, which is a big addition for Notre Dame, but it could be an issue for Indiana.
Well, if you guys make a run in the playoffs, what does it look like? Run for 160 to 180 yards a game and just playing unreal defense and like hitting people in the teeth. I mean, kind of playing like old school Seattle Seahawks, Pete Carroll. I would say like Baltimore Ravens way back in the day with Ray Lewis. Like passing game isn't going to fucking blow anyone out of the water. We're going to run the ball down your throat and be the toughest team. And that's kind of how you're going to play, which for a long time in college football, like that was college football. And then it changed. But in this new format, because let's say you would have been a Final Four team this year. I don't think you would have, but let's just hypothetically say like you're in the Final Four. Well, those are in great environments, right? It's in Arizona. It's at the Rose Bowl. It's in Dallas. It's in Miami. Like the weather has never been a factor in any of these playoff games. It might rain in Miami, but it's not. It's a 80-degree rain. This is the first time in college football, in a bowl situation that matters. Like I know they play like the Yankee Bowl or whatever, but the weather's a huge factor. So does that neutralize it? Like, does that give Indiana a chance? Because who knows? What if you guys fumble a ball that you wouldn't have normally fumbled if you were playing them at the Rose Bowl? It's hard. I mean, playing 25-degree weather is fucking hard.
Yeah, that's one of my worries is Riley Leonard's been prone to have one of those turnovers that you didn't see coming or one of those throws like against USC. It's like, what are you seeing here for Riley Leonard? But I think he's gotten better throughout the pocket. I think they do have wide receivers on the outside, but you're right. In pressure situations, who's going to step up? And if Indiana is able to stop the run and, you got a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 6, like can Riley Leonard in this offense get things going, or is Indiana going to have the momentum? But I think you're right. An
expensive ass ticket.
Yeah, it's like $1,200, $1,400. Yeah,
Jesus,
absurd. But I think part of that too is most of these fans are. I mean, for Indiana, they don't have to travel too far, so you don't have to fly, which you can spend more money on tickets. But for Notre Dame to have a home playoff game, it's going to be fun. And hopefully your prediction's correct. I think Notre Dame wins by 10, 11 points. I'm just kind of a little hesitant because I'm a Notre Dame fan, but yeah, you hope that they can go in and put on a showing against Indiana. Let's go to the second game, the first morning game, SMU-Penn State. 11 SMU going to 6 Penn State. SMU, people didn't expect them to be there. They lose against Clemson, and the committee people back and forth. I think Joel Klatt said that Alabama should have been in, but I think for SMU, if they weren't to get in, it would have definitely put a lot of questions about the conference championship. And then you got 6 Penn State with Drew Allar returning next season. You feel good about Penn State after that Oregon game, but how do you see this game going with Penn State? Is this going to be another one of those where it feels like it's going to be chalk again, or do you think maybe SMU has some light against Penn State?
It's funny. Last time we talked, a lot of people, like some SMU fans, were like, we were getting a shitty ref. We're getting any of the whistles. It's like, okay, guys, you guys are almost a 10-point dog in this game. I hope, Signetti pisses some people off, but I do hope that Indiana-Notre Dame is a good game. I am rooting for Penn State to beat the living shit out of SMU. Not even because I thought like Alabama should have got it. Like, I don't even care. But it's like the ACC got 2 teams in. And you can say the same about Clemson, but at least, I mean, they did what you have to do. It's like NCAA basketball. You win your conference tournament, you win your conference championship game, you're automatically in. I got no issue with it. But I hope Penn State kills them. But this game, if it's like 15-15 or 20-20 in the second half, and it's like going back and forth, there are going to be a lot of tight you-know-what in that stadium because this guy does not win a lot of big games. He simply does not. And you could argue of all the coaches in this thing, who has more pressure on him than James Franklin to just win a couple games? Not just this game, but then they're going to be a heavy favorite in the next game just to win a couple games. If he wins a couple playoff games, even if the next one would be against Boise, right?
Yeah.
You don't get that much credit. It'd be like, well, he beat SMU and Boise, and then he loses to, let's say, Georgia, right? It's like, well, I do think people would be like, listen, you won 2 playoff games, 1 game at home. It would be a big deal for him. I think of all the coaches in the first round, like he's not in jeopardy of getting fired. Like Ryan Day could get fired. But I do think people would start being pissed off. Like, what's all this recruiting? What's it all for? So I think there is, and I like them. I think there are a sleeper team here. I actually was really impressed against Oregon and think if their offense was playing like their defense would have to be better. But if they're playing Gunner Stockton, like they couldn't beat Georgia, right? So I like Penn State in this game. Well, I'm rooting for Penn State. Things get weird with James. And this is another, like, this ain't going to be 60 degrees here. It's going to be cold. But Penn State doesn't care. They don't, their receivers kind of irrelevant, right? They want to run the ball, throw it to their tight end. They got to play better defense. One thing SMU has is explosive playmakers. Now, does that work? And whatever it's going to be in, where's Penn State? College Station? Where's that?
Happy Valley.
Happy Valley.
Yeah.
Abdul
Carter is one of those guys against Oregon that he was not seen at all. He's supposed to be a top 5 defensive end. So you think that he would be a big factor in that game. But it was weird, though, because Oregon's is a great offense, but them to put up 40-plus points against Penn State, it was kind of one of those puzzling things where in other games, I think we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, it was like, if you'd have told me Penn State would have scored 35, 38 points against Oregon, you think they'd win that game because of how good Penn State's defense is. But their offense, their 2 running backs are definitely their strongest point. Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, their ability to get those guys in the passing game has definitely been the difference there. And then how about Tyler Warren, man? I mean, he finished 7th in the Heisman voting, 7th as a tight end. That's unbelievable.
I pulled up, I just typed in Happy Valley, PA. Saturday, high of 25, low of 13. I don't think people quite understand that don't live in some of these areas, like how truly cold it is in some of these places in December and January. Like how cold South Bend is, how cold, like when you come back from winter break to go to class at Penn State, like it ain't, it's cold where you went to school in Montana, but like it ain't that, right? I mean, it's frigid in the Midwest, like Ohio State. Like it's fucking cold. It's going to have a huge impact. And I mean, I didn't watch that much SMU football, but they like to spread around and throw the football. Like, isn't that their offense?
Yeah, their quarterback's fun to watch. Kevin
Yeah, I
Jennings is
mean,
fun to watch.
well, it's just hard to play like that if it's even if the sun's out. If it's 23 degrees, you can't feel your hands. Who does that impact the most? The wideouts. Penn State's like, we don't even throw it to those guys.
Yeah, their quarterback doesn't wear any gloves either. So he's a Texas boy. You wonder how he's going to be in that cold weather. But speaking of another game that actually has the hottest weather, 60 degrees.
Do you like upset? Do you like upset there?
For Clemson, Texas, or for Penn State?
First, the Penn State game.
Penn State should roll them. I think. If they get out to an early lead, it's gonna be tough for SMU. You mentioned the cold weather. Like, I think Penn State should beat them by 14 plus. I think the line's like 7.5, 8.5. But 12 Clemson, 5 Texas. This was the one last 2 weeks ago. You talked about how if there were to be an upset, you feel good about Clemson being a bad matchup for Texas. How do you see this one going?
I think this thing could get weird. I mean, that quarterback for Clemson's been playing well, and he was a guy that was much in the line last year. And honestly, after the first week one Georgia, I was like, the biggest difference in Dabo's program is like he went from Deshaun to Trevor, who were awesome college players, to DJ to this guy, and it's like you just miss on the quarterback, it's going to screw you. They still have good players, and then as the season went on, you watched him. He's a big time athlete. Like, how many long touchdown runs does he have this season? I feel like so many times you'd be watching the game and the ESPN ticker because they're playing Virginia or Duke or whoever. It's like, Clint goes for 50. It's like he could run. And then you watch him against SMU in some of these big games. Like, he does have a big arm, and when he's in rhythm, I like him more than whatever Texas is rolling out, which is obviously yours. Now we'll see if Arch plays way more in this game, but I don't know. I mean, obviously Texas is really talented. They're loaded on defense. Their defense is good. And offensively, is it Bond? The running back 26 is a good player. I mean, they got serious weapons as well. But like their quarterback, and Sark takes some shit. And listen, I've given him a lot over the years. I think it's hard to call plays when you don't trust your quarterback. And I feel like a lot of times, I mean, you went to the game, was it Georgia? He just calls games trying to coach around him, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, it feels like that first Georgia Texas game, all they were throwing was checkdowns, and he felt too, I guess, hesitant, too scared to throw the ball down the field. They had that one corner blitz on him that he fumbled, and ever since then, he just seemed rattled. And then on top of that, you got an ankle injury with Ewers. Like, if things get a little frisky early and it's a tight game with Clemson against Dabo and what they're going on, like, I don't know. Sark, you pull the plug and you put Arch in just for a mobile quarterback, just to have more options with the amount of weapons they have with the wide receivers and the 2 running backs that they roll out there too. But seems like a sketchy situation for Sark in Texas because you have so much talent on defense. Like, the number 1 defense in the country, Barron, their stud corner, just won the Thorpe Award. So, they're going to hold their own. It's just offensively, you're right. They've just been so mid this season with how much talent they have.
Team speed, and you and I have both seen them live. Their team speed on defense is impressive. The linebackers can all move. Their defensive line's huge. Like you said, the DBs are good. They hit. Like, damn, these guys, I don't know how many of these guys are top 50 picks, but they definitely got several of them. And if some of these guys are underclassmen, this guy fucking might be a top 10 pick in 2 years. I mean, they got serious dudes. I think, when we talk about Ryan Day and James Franklin have like tangible pressure on them, I think Quinn Ewers, like, this is a big moment. Like, Sark kind of shed that last year, gets him to the playoffs, gets him back, gets him to the SEC championship game. Like, Sark's established himself. He's good. I think the pressure in this game is on the quarterback. It's like, and like you said, he's already shown he'll go to the Penn.
Yeah. My biggest worry about Clemson is their wide receivers are so young. Like, their leading receiver against SMU is a true freshman. They've got another sophomore wide receiver.
But they're recruiting. These guys are elite recruits. Like, number 12,
5-star. Yeah, Wesco is a part of that amazing receiver true freshman class. But you do wonder against those physical DBs. I mean, Georgia's wide receivers were prone out to get open against them too. Like, and then Maffa, the running back, hasn't been getting going, but Cade Klubnik has shown, which is crazy, from the game 1 until now, that when there's a lot of pressure and things aren't rolling, that he's able to run with his legs and he's able to, like, the offense seems like it's centering more around Cade Klubnik this year versus in past, it was always the running game with Shipley or, the stud wide receivers they have on the outside. But That's my only worry with Clemson is the receivers they have. And you mentioned those two edge rushers that Texas has. Sophomore Anthony Hill Jr. He'll be a top 5 pick, and then Colin Simmons, true freshman. So you got those guys on the edges too to try to stop Clemson's running
I remember
game.
watching them warm up in the Red River game. I'm like, this team is bigger than some NFL teams. Their D line is huge.
Huge. Yeah.
So that's where it gets back to Ewers. Ewers just can turn it over and look like shit. And you're like, if you just play, you could let this defense carry you. You know, a lot of Saban's teams like McElroy and McCarron, game manager. Well, Ewers sometimes thinks I'm fucking Mahomes. It's like, bro, calm down.
Yeah, they had those two. He had those two fumbles against A&M, or the one fumble in the interception. They should have blown A&M out. They won by like 10 points.
He turned it over
17-7.
like back-to-back drives.
Yeah, in the second half, and then he had that interception to Georgia in their own territory, and Texas was able to hold him to field goal. But you're right; it's like those once he starts getting rolling, he feels like he gets a little too comfortable, and then he makes those errant throws. But
I think obviously, Notre Dame and Ohio State are probably, the two biggest brands in college football in terms of like universal America. You could have put this game at night too. Like if one of those games like Notre Dame or Ohio State had put in this spot, you could have easily put at Texas hosting Clemson Friday or Saturday night. Like this, I think Penn State SMU is the last one anyone would choose. But I don't think this one is very far away from the other primetime games. Like this is an elite football game. I would expect this thing to be pretty tight.
Don't you almost think that Dabo's got the advantage here because he's got no pressure on him? They're a 3-loss team, barely sneaking the playoff. No one's really talking about him. Like, I feel like for him, his play calling in this game, he's just going to air it out and try to just expose whatever Texas has defensively. And it's going to be interesting to see because it's 11.5 right now as the spread.
Well, I just pulled up DraftKings. It's 12. Like that seems. How could SMU-Penn State be 8.5 and this thing be 12? Like, to me, that line, I'm tempted to put a lot of cash on Clemson. Like, not only can Clemson win, I would expect this to be a close game. I would be surprised. Texas, one, they haven't been blowing teams out. Like, they struggle to beat Arkansas. You watch them on random games, host the Oklahoma game, and after they got beat by Georgia, you thought, okay, they'll take a deep breath. They were in a lot of closer games, minus the Florida game where they beat the shit out of them. I felt like they were just like, what's going on with Vanderbilt? What's going on with Arkansas? They play in way more weird games than they do a team that's a 12-point favorite. Like that seems a little large to me. I don't know about you. It's the biggest spread by far. To me, Notre Dame should be a 12-point favorite, not Texas.
Yeah, I agree too. And then the last game, 9 Tennessee at 8 Ohio State, the nightcap game. A lot of pressure on Ryan Day. Can they bounce back after probably, I would say, the worst loss in Ryan Day's career? You would say maybe the worst loss in Ohio State the last 10, 12 years. Like, what do you see in this game?
I saw Chip Kelly said yesterday, or maybe a couple days ago, that they have gone over with a fine-tooth comb the tape to Michigan. And it's like, what was really to go over? It wasn't, players were like, you guys kept calling plays into the teeth of the defense. It's like, it was an offensive philosophy that you don't trust your quarterback, and you have these elite wide receivers. I mean, what's his name comes back this season. They get one of the best freshmen we've ever seen. They go all in on Will Howard. And let's face it, they don't trust him that much. And if they could have a redo, would they just rather have Kyle McCord? I think we've talked about that. Now, Chip likes a more mobile quarterback, and Will Howard, kind of like your guy at Notre Dame, is, just a big physical fucking runner. But I don't know. I mean, if they don't trust him, and listen, in the transfer portal era, you lose a tackle and then your center snaps his Achilles. Like that's, 20 years ago, Ohio State would have had the next first rounder that's a freshman and, taking a little step back, but like, we're fine. Now it's like, what if you look back and you go, this guy's not even going to be on our team next year that we have to play. So what does Tennessee thrive with? Defense and defensive line. I think this thing could get weird. And Tennessee, I think we talked about this last week, Rocky Top, Rocky Mountains. This isn't Florida or Miami. Like it's cold in Knoxville. So they're coming. It might not be Ohio State cold, but they are not sitting in 78-degree weather right now. So I think they're going to come, and defensive teams travel, right? If you have a good defense, like the Rams play in LA, but when their defense is good, they can play anybody. The 49ers play in fucking the Bay. They've had a good defense for 5 years. They've won road playoff games in Green Bay. Like that shit translates. Running game and defense. Now, Sawyer freaking out. Maybe they rally the troops on defense, but I don't know. I think this thing, Tennessee's offense with their quarterback, you watch them some games, you're like, what am I witnessing? And I wanted to have Nico be like the next great quarterback, and that didn't play out. But running game defense. This is a tough matchup for Ohio State. This would be a tough matchup for anybody. I mean, Tennessee could beat any of these teams, right? Like if I told you Tennessee was going to Notre Dame, you'd be pretty nervous, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean Dylan Sampson, the running back. Like we talked about it last week, how if you had to face any team in the first round, Tennessee's the least one that you would want to pick if you're Ohio State because they've got a dominant running back with Dylan Sampson, who's got almost 1,500 yards, 22 touchdowns. Like he leads the SEC, and that's what they bank on. And on top of that, the defensive line is their biggest strength for Tennessee. And you mentioned Ohio State missing two of their biggest offensive linemen. Their center, I think, won center of the year and didn't even play the last 3 games for Ohio State. So I think it's a bad matchup for him. Nico, I'm just up and down with. I don't know what to think about him. Like some games, that Oklahoma game at the beginning of the season, he had some big time throws, some deep balls, and you're like, man, this guy could be that guy for Tennessee. He could be that guy that can make him 2-dimensional. And then you got some games like Georgia just making errant throws, not really seeing the defense. So I wonder if Ohio State somehow is able to run the foot or able to stop the run, I should say, and put the hands on Nico. They're going to be a big advantage in this football game.
People forget, but up until Heupel got there, Tennessee was in bad shape. They had been bad for a long time. It's why a lot of people were like, obviously Georgia's an elite program, but Florida's down and Tennessee's down. And it's way easier for him. And he was at UCF, 12-1, 10-3. Then I don't even count the COVID year at a place like UCF. Then he gets the Tennessee job. And after that first year, going 7-6, 11-2, 9-4, 10-2. And he's won the last 2 bowl games. So it's like, who did he play last year in the Citrus Bowl? He played Iowa.
It was Iowa, yeah.
Which has an elite defense. And 2 years ago in the Orange Bowl, he played Clemson, and he won 31-14. So this is a guy that, going back to his playing days, when he won the Natty with Bob Stoops, to as a coach, I think people overlook him. It's weird because he's pretty big right now. He doesn't look like his former skinny quarterback self, and he looks closer to like 58 than he does 46, which actually how old he is, because he's large. But he can fucking coach, man. And he's one of those offensive coaches like McVay or Kyle or something, where it's like the offense is his baby, but his defenses are tough. Like those are scary guys. I mean, that's the thing with Ryan Day. It's not like obviously he knows what to do with the quarterback and the passing game. Like he's good with that, but you don't say his teams are tough. If anything, they've gotten soft. And who has given Ryan Day trouble? Tough teams. Tennessee's built a lot like their quarterback is sexier than I would say JJ, because he's like 5-star #1 recruit behind Arch. He's like Jamarcus. He could throw it like 700 yards, but he's not that great right now. But their team is built a lot like Michigan. Run the ball, play D line. Let's fucking go. Like I think Tennessee would gladly play a game like 17-15. Deep down, Ohio State, we've seen, wants no part of that type game. They want to play like they played against Oregon. They go, if we play like we played against Oregon, we win that game 7 out of 10 times. That was, we were comfortable, and they have been really since in the Ryan Day era. Shootouts. When they start getting leaned on, they have crumbled under Ryan Day.
Do you think Ryan Day
and only the good teams can lean on him, right?
Do you think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, I mean, what happened with Michigan, you think they're going to try to still establish the inside running game against this defensive line, or you think they may start a little early and then say, okay, we're going to abandon it, maybe go what they did against Penn State, trying to get those guys out in space? And if Jeremiah Smith, I mean, can they get this guy the football? And this is the most explosive player on their team. He had under 30 yards against Michigan. It seems like if they do that again, Ohio State's going to be in the same situation against Michigan, or what it was against Michigan.
Well, I'm just clicking on the weather. Saturday, winds about 10 miles an hour, but high of 30, low of 15. Well, it's going to be closer to the low because when are they playing? They're playing at night. So are you just slinging the pill all around with 22-degree weather? Now, if it's raining or windy, obviously it makes it a lot harder than just freezing cold, but are their wide receivers comfortable with just dominating in 20-degree weather? It is harder to play like that. Especially like it's one thing being a pro and being in it for years. It's another thing being a 17, 18-year-old true freshman who's supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's like, I can't feel my hands, coach. So I don't know. I mean, you kind of have to run it in these games. Like playoff football in the NFL, right? Especially AFC football, Green Bay, Philly, like the running game matters. It doesn't usually matter in college football because they're always playing in controlled environments. This is the first time it's like you have to change your game plan a little bit because Tennessee is like, we'll hand it to them 30 times a game or on Saturday night. We got no problem. Penn State, like 13-10, get ready. We're going to give it to you 40 times tonight. What are they going to do? Fucking sling. They're going to attempt 40, 50 passes. Well, we can rush the passer. So I think weather plays a enormous factor this weekend. Enormous. And I wonder with Ohio State. Now, I understand like they live in it. But how many cold games does Ohio State truly play in a year?
They always play at noon or like 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Always playing those noon slots.
And it feels like the last couple of years against the last game of the season against Harbaugh in the conference championship, whenever they haven't been in a while because Michigan has, but it's in a dome, right, at Indy. In their games the last couple of years, Michigan, Ohio State, like it's been cold, but like you said, sun's out. Sun ain't out in this game. That's a lot colder when that sun's not out. Because even if it's 25 degrees, if the sun's on you, you feel like, yeah, a little warmth, get to the sideline. If it's fucking ice cold, I like Tennessee in this game.
If Tennessee wins, what happens with Ryan Day?
Talent. I respect Ohio. Like, I don't think that, I don't look at them like I do SMU or obviously Indiana. Like, their talent, it's not going to be that much different. But, like, the key, missing the offensive lineman. Like, you've seen Minnesota, like, their offensive line got hurt, and all of a sudden Sam Darnold's under duress. It's just, there's a reason one guy starts and the other guy's the backup. There's a gap. And there's usually a wider gap, like, certain positions, like the linebacker or corner, and be like, I think I'm just as good as that guy. And there might be some truth to that on, college and pro teams. There usually is not like the backup offensive tackle or the backup center. It's like, I'm better than that guy. It's like, no, this guy's better. And everyone knows it. I think with the line of scrimmage and quarterback, like it's always pretty clear. It's like, yeah, this guy starts for a reason. And the backups might be solid players, but like there's a gap. There's usually a huge gap with like your starting offensive lineman, especially in the transfer portal era. It'd be a big, on the flip side, it'd be a great win for Ryan Day. It'd be a good win. I'm not just trying, people think I'm just shitting on the guy. I mean, I don't like him and I'm rooting against him, but I can also acknowledge you beat Tennessee at night at home. That's a good ass win.
Do you think, because like the whole playoff as a whole, we talked about all the quarterback position and we talked earlier about Carson Beck, Milroe, about them returning. There's no real elite quarterbacks in this playoff. Is there any of them that you trust? And do you think, I guess, the deciding factor in all these games is just going to be old smash mouth football, line of scrimmage play from all these teams? Because it feels like all these quarterbacks, some of them, their teams don't really trust. And in big time moments, they may have to pull through. But it seems like all these teams have one thing in common. It's going to come down to both sides of the trenches for every one of these 12 teams.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gets back to the weather thing is a pretty big factor in 3 of the games. I like Drew Aller the most, but I'm also looking at that from like more of a scouting perspective. Like he can be a roller coaster ride in a game. Yeah, I mean, I think there are major question marks on Will Howard. There's a question mark like the one way Indiana could get into it, right? If they stop the run and they force you to like second and third and long, like all of a sudden he turns the ball over, he's not accurate, like he can keep you back in the game. I think Riley Leonard and Will Howard are pretty big wild cards because I think their team ideally would not want to put it on their shoulder, but the game dictates that. Like, what if Indiana would jump up like 10-3, right? And they're slowing down the run. All of a sudden, you have to pass. Same thing with Ohio State. I think those two guys and Quinn Ewers, like, when it's off, you kind of know it. Like, ugh. Now the difference is Will and Riley can run. Quinn Ewers, I mean, I know he's had running plays like a breakout, a scramble, but he's not like a runner like those guys. Like you can just call quarterback power for those two guys, which I would do to settle down the game. I would guess like over under carries for your guy. If you're just, if it's just a solid, like you're not blowing them out, but you're in control. I mean, they're going to rely on him running the ball, right?
Yeah, I'd say 15 carries at least.
Yeah. I
Him
mean,
with the two running backs they have. Yeah, they're just going to run the ball with that three-headed monster. My next question for you: you mentioned Penn State earlier. Would you say that's your dark horse to win the national championship? Is Penn State, or is there another team that you think can maybe make a run that not a lot of people are talking about, or do you think it's just going to be pretty much chalk when it's all said and done?
I was looking at the bracket yesterday. God, I hope. Could Arizona State take out Texas or Clemson, whoever wins that game? You'd hope that'd be cool. But it just does feel like it's going to be Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State. Uh, Penn State would have to win games. It'd be one thing to beat SMU and then beat Boise. It'd be another thing to then rattle off Georgia, Ohio State, or Oregon. I mean, that even Texas. I mean, I think they would be, if Texas is there, they would be the underdog in that game. It would be one of the craziest turnarounds for, a coach. Like I'm gonna be rooting for them. I want to see them play well because I just think they have a pretty fun team. They have explosive defensive players. Warren's an awesome story. He's a good player. Running backs are fun, but it's like the coach. I have no trust in my fellow bald man. But I don't really like any of these teams. Oregon clearly is the best team, but like all of a sudden they got to play Tennessee or Ohio State again. And you got Penn State playing Boise and Texas playing Arizona State, which no disrespect, Kenny, but your team's just not as talented as it's like, I don't know. I think it's going to come from one of the 4 or 5 top teams. I think one of the biggest stories in the playoffs would be if Boise, Arizona State, Indiana, or SMU were to win a game. Like that would be like feel like a historic upset, right? Indiana, big underdog, SMU, big underdog. Clemson's a huge underdog on the number, but it wouldn't feel like those teams, right? Arizona State, Boise, SMU. It would be like you'd get, if you bet $1,000 or $100, I mean, you'd make a lot of money. I mean, especially if you took a money line. But I don't think the narrative would be like, yeah, Dabo Swinney's won multiple national championships. He's got a bunch of NFL guys on his team. But if like Arizona State or if can you imagine if Penn State lost to Boise?
Oof. Fiesta Bowl right here in town too. Oh my goodness, Ashton Jeanty has a great day too. Him losing the Heisman Trophy, their inability to run the football, or their inability to stop Ashton Jeanty. I mean, that would definitely put a lot of people puzzling for James Franklin. And you mentioned Arizona State. I don't know, man. This team, it just seems like they just play with so much grit, but I don't think they match up with Texas very well. I know they're probably praying for Clemson. That's second round.
Well, could they? I mean, could they run the ball on Texas?
Oh, that'd be tough. Cam Scott was fun, but that offensive line against Texas's D line, and they haven't faced anyone in the Big 12 like that. I'm trying to think of a dominant defensive line, maybe K State. I can't really think of one that they've faced in the Big 12.
Well, if Texas beats Clemson by 10 plus points and they are a 12-point favorite against Clemson, what are they against Arizona State? Are we talking 17 points?
Yeah.
15? Because it would be more than Clemson, right? Clemson is going to get more respect in a game against Texas than Arizona State, even off a bye, which essentially these games are off byes too. It's a longer bye, but it's not like this team's well rested. I think that number would be massive. If Texas were to look good against Clemson, well, let's say win, 30-15 or something, but, kind of like similar to I think the Georgia Texas game was like 31-17 or whatever, but like a dominant fashion. I think that number would be massive against Arizona State. You could convince me if they win by like 20 plus points against Clemson that it's a 20-point spread or something.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Who's your
there is a scenario where Arizona State has like 150 yards of offense against Texas.
Yeah, that defense would be not a fun matchup for Arizona State. Who is your? I know we're about to start the CFP. Everyone's coming out with their predictions and stuff like that. Do you have a Final Four or a champ that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I was tempted to go Arizona State. I think Clemson can win this game. And if Clemson wins this game, and I know you said Arizona State would want them, I would then pick Dabo to beat Arizona State. So, like, I do think that's got sleeper potential to be in the Final Four, Clemson. I think it's hard to bet against Oregon. I think it's hard to bet against Oregon regardless of their path and to not win the national championship. Right? If you're just betting against them, you're basically just saying, I don't like their path because the way they've been playing, I mean, they look better than everybody. It's these guys have kept so quiet and dabbled, or I mean, Kirby doesn't have to say anything. Like, what is their quarterback situation? Like, is Carson Beck, like, have you seen anything? He's
Nothing.
kept it pretty mum. If this was the NFL, news would already broke. He's out for the season. He tore it. He's week to week. I think the more quiet they are, I think it's pretty clear. He's probably not playing because they would announce Carson Beck's fine, whatever. He's going to be playing. Uh, that's a pretty big wild card to bring in if a backup quarterback has to play several games. Like this isn't, the BCS where you just got to play one game or even two. Like Georgia would have to play 3 games. And I think I don't even know if I would have liked him with Carson Beck. Who knows? Maybe Gunnar Stockton's better than Carson Beck, but it's hard. I don't know that. It's like Carson Wentz might start this Saturday for the Chiefs. Your guess is good as mine. I could see him throw a couple touchdowns. I could see him throw 3 interceptions. That's what like Gunnar Stockton is to me. I do think Penn State's in pretty good position. And if you tell me Penn State, like they got lit up by Dylan Gabriel, well, Dylan Gabriel's fucking good. So if they get Georgia in that Final Four and it's Gunnar Stockton, like how would you not give him a chance? The game would be ugly. I mean, it could look a lot like Ohio State, Penn State, but that game was close. Like Penn State, I think a lot of people got on James, like, James, that was a winnable game. you got your ass kicked in some of these. That was not like you had a chance. You were on the goal line. Like you didn't give it to Tyler Warren. You ran the ball straight up the middle. You're up 10-0 in that game. The Oregon game was weird because their offense, their defense was giving up so many points. That was a Penn State thing, but they hadn't really looked like that all season. Like their defense had played well. And Georgia ain't Oregon on offense. So what if Oregon were to get knocked out and they never have to see them again? Maybe they match up pretty well against everybody else. I think Penn State's a little bit of a sleeper.
Georgia's the wild card too. You're right. I mean, besides Trevor Etienne doesn't even play that game against Texas. You wonder if they're able to run the football and win that football game. And then it's like they're wide receivers. You can definitely tell they miss Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers. It's like if they were to get in a situation with Stockton, I don't know how much I feel about them. And then they got a really good defense with Jalen Walker and Mikael Williams. It's like they're just a wild card. You're right about if Penn State and they make their way all the way to the national championship and face an Oregon team rematch. I mean, it seems like a pretty realistic chance on that side of the bracket.
I think all these teams are. Oregon probably is the one team that isn't based on how they're coming in playing. But what if their first 2 games are Ohio State, Texas? I mean, that's just to get to the national championship. Even if we all agreed those 2 teams have flaws, that is a fucking pounding on a 60-minute game. I mean, even if you beat Texas by 10, that's a long day playing those guys. Dylan Gabriel probably getting hit a couple times by those NFL guys. Same thing with Ohio State. It's tough. If Oregon wins, it's a remarkable season if they go through in unscathed. To not lose a game, it won't be as sexy as the Burrow LSU 15-0 team, but it would be as impressive of like this team just kind of dominated everybody. And even when they had their one scare against the smaller opponent, it was the best running back in the country. I think that Boise game doesn't look as crazy when we go, yeah, this guy's going to be one of the first running backs off the board in the draft. He just had a 2,000-yard season and like had a legit chance of the Heisman from Boise State.
So you think Oregon would be your pick? 16-0 to win it?
I pick Oregon.
Yeah. It seems
I guess what are they? Yeah, the 13-0 right now, so 16-0 would be impressive.
It seems like all the futures, though, for Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, maybe Penn State's the 4th team, and Texas, seems like they're all so low, like plus 200, plus 300, plus 400. That doesn't seem normal from past years where it's that low. Does it? Does it seem low to you? Or
I don't want exposure. I mean, I think they think all these teams are the same, would be my guess. The NCAA tournament is where you can get a lot of guys, 15-1 that are the equivalent of Texas or whatever. But you got to play more games. Like Oregon only has to play 3 games. So if you go, they're the best team and they only got to play 3 games. And where's their second game? Or I mean, their first game's at the Rose Bowl, right? So that's going to be a home game. So I
Yeah.
mean that's a pretty sweet Rose Bowl if it's Oregon, Ohio State, or Oregon, Tennessee.
Bring it back to the Pac-12 Big Ten days. And
Yeah.
that's what I think of. I mean, the granddaddy of them all. My last question for you, we wrap this one up. Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. I know we expected that, talking about it last week. It was kind of puzzling how Ashton Jeanty won the popular vote. I was just curious your thoughts about all this buzz going on with how the Heisman Trophy voting should be changed. And I think I saw there was 11 players that had first place votes. I know it's not a big deal in terms of like the whole grandscape of college football, but do you think the voting method maybe should get adjustment, or is this one of those things where I guess I don't know, that just is going to be the same? We just kind of have to deal with the consequences of
it's
media driven.
It's always been weird. I think it's a remarkable accomplishment that a guy from Boise State could even be in the mix. I think the right guy won. I think if you have Ashton Jeanty's season at Ohio State, Georgia, LSU, Bama, he's the champion. Just like if you put Travis Hunter's season at one of those schools, he wins in a landslide. I think the reason it was so close because both of them, one guy plays in the Mountain West, the other guy plays in the Big 12. If you put them at Ohio State and one of those guys in the Big 10 or the SEC, I think they separate. It's not even close. But you could also, is anyone running for 2,000 yards in the SEC or the Big 10? Probably not. Could you play 110 snaps every single game in the SEC? I think it'd be pretty difficult. It's a little easier against, playing Arizona State and playing LSU just aren't the same thing. I know they didn't play Arizona State, but you know what I mean. So I had no problem with it. Very cool moment. And yeah, I think I got it right.
His fiance got a lot of backlash on the internet. I don't know if you saw that stuff. It's a puzzling thing going on.
She's been getting shit on since the games, right? When they're not hugging,
Yeah, and she's got a money tattoo, like the money symbol on her ring finger. So people think that, she's just going for the money. And yeah, it was one of those things. She's sitting down and he just won the award, all that pajama going on, backlash. People thinking that she's just a gold digger or something for Travis. They've been together for like 5 years, but
maybe
it's
she's an influencer. Maybe she's making her own money.
Now with Travis, she definitely is.
Yeah.
It's funny to see.
Okay,
my last thing. Did you see the Pop-Tarts Bowl trophy? You a big fan of the Pop-Tarts Bowl?
I'm a big fan of all that. Pouring mayonnaise on somebody, big Pop-Tart. I'm into it.
I like it, man. I mean, they're doing everything possible. A lot of people last year watched it. They unveiled like the new Pop-Tart and they had people like peeling off the Pop-Tart, eating an edible Pop-Tart mascot. I think it's fun for college football. It brings some kind of light to the bowl games where people are going to watch that game with Miami, Iowa State. I think Cam Ward's going to play in that game. So I like that the Pop-Tart Bowl is trying to do everything to bring more attention to them. But hopefully more bowl games can do that same thing.
Okay, Jackson, you're the man. Enjoy the games and for your own sake, go Irish. And hopefully you guys get a big win.
Appreciate you, man. Happy holidays. See you soon.
Talk to you soon, buddy.